It's called the Caitlin Clark effect.
The Caitlin Clark effect. The Caitlin Clark effect.
It'll probably be known as Clarkonomics.
Caitlin Clark is driving record numbers for the league.
For all the great athletes who have spent time playing in the Circle City, you know the ones: Peyton, Reggie, Andrew, Tamika, Tyrese. One could argue, and many certainly do, that Indianapolis has never seen a phenomenon quite like this. An athlete who took the city by storm and rejuvenated their entire league just by being here. A force with the power to change their sport and its finances for years to come.
Caitlin Clark's face is everywhere. Her coming to Indiana is the kind of blockbuster deal that happens once in a generation.
The merchandise sales are through the roof, with jersey sales seeing a 1,200% increase, and the top seller is number 22.
The number one overall pick in this year's WNBA draft is considered one of the greatest college basketball players of all time. And now she's in the pros and is expected to fill arenas wherever she plays and wherever the Fever are as well.
Caitlin Clark has enamored Indy and the sports world in a way that few could have ever imagined. While that journey started during her time at Iowa, since May of 2024, she's been a linchpin in the turnaround of a struggling Indiana Fever franchise. She's drawn millions more eyeballs to the WNBA, and her style of play has engrossed many and exhausted others. She's also inspired countless girls with dreams of going pro, the same dream she had as a kid. But her impact extends even farther. Clark has opened the door for difficult conversations about race and about the perception and feasibility of women's sports as a business enterprise. And for Indianapolis, she's caught the attention of local tourism leaders who see new opportunities, or the chance to revisit old ones, that could augment the city's claim as the amateur sports capital to that of women's sports capital.
There's a whole different vibe and energy about the WNBA in Indianapolis, about the Indiana Fever, about Caitlin Clark, about women's sports.
Some have said her influence on women's sports is undeniable, while others remain skeptical of the WNBA's long-term outlook. To hear those involved and those watching closely tell it, what's happening in Indianapolis marks a new chapter for the sports industry, locally and far beyond. Throughout this podcast, we'll delve into not only the impact Clark has had on the city and women's sports, but how the Fever is capitalizing on its resurgence. We'll also explore how Indianapolis is positioning itself to make the most of this once-in-a-generation, and some have argued, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The chance to develop a portion of the city's sports and tourism ecosystem around women's athletics. Local leaders say they want to turn this moment into a movement. But how does that happen? Who does it take? What are the risks? What's the potential reward? From where Clark and the Fever sit, there are still titles to compete for and a league to transform. But for Indianapolis, there's an entire sports industry to reconstruct. All because the city won the basketball lottery. I'm Mickey Shuey, and this is Beyond Clarkonomics, a podcast by IBJ Media.
The number one overall draft pick in 2024. Let's hear it. Caitlin Clark to Indiana.
Caitlin Clark is an American icon.
I can't think of a better place for myself to start my career. A place that loves basketball, supports women's basketball.
Everything came together perfectly for the Indiana Fever.
This giant opportunity to cast Indy as a place to visit.
This is Beyond Clarkonomics.
This episode was reported and produced before the Fever announced Caitlin Clark would be out for at least 2 weeks due to injury.
WNBA draft. The Indiana Fever select Caitlin.
The Indiana Fever had good odds to secure their second number one pick in as many years for the 2024 draft, about 44%, but it was never a certainty. After all, the team was on the upswing after selecting Aaliyah Boston in 2023 with the franchise's first ever top pick. It all came down to luck. Much like the NBA, the WNBA relies on a lottery system to determine the order of the first several picks in its annual draft, the mechanism used to bring in a mix of collegiate and international athletes into the league. It's rare for a team to get number one overall in back-to-back years because the league determines the number of entries a team gets based on its win-loss record from the most recent 2 seasons. That means that teams with worse records are given better odds at winning the top pick. Think of it like any raffle, where you can buy more tickets to increase your chances of getting picked. Only in this case, the tickets are based on a team's performance. The worse they are, the better. And instead of a prize, a team gets a shot at drafting one of the best young women's basketball players in the world. The Seattle Storm have done it twice, in 2001 and 2002, and again in 2015 and 2016. And the Las Vegas Aces did it in 2018 and 2019. In Seattle's case, the picks led to a title in 2004, as well as a title in 2018. Las Vegas reached the title round in 2020 and won back-to-back WNBA championships in 2022 and 2023. Likewise, it was a stroke of luck that Clark declared for the draft at all, instead of using her final year of collegiate eligibility. Her status as a superstar made her one of the biggest players in the name, image, and likeness space, a mechanism that went into effect in mid-2021, allowing student athletes to make money for the first time. Clark, too, had already established herself as one of the best college players to ever step foot on a court.
My name is Rebecca Lobo. I was one of the original players in the WNBA from 1997 to 2003, and since then I've been covering the WNBA and women's college basketball for ESPN.
For Lobo, who has followed Clark closely since she began at Iowa, things couldn't have worked out better for the Fever, the WNBA, and the city of Indianapolis.
No disrespect to any other player, but no other player is Caitlin. No other player brings that kind of viewership on TV. No other player brings that kind of demand for ticket sales. No one else. So even if Caitlin had chosen not to enter the 24 draft, would Indiana still have gotten a very good player? Yes. Would their team have been better? Yes. It still would have been completely different from what happened because no one else in the history of the WNBA has had the impact on ticket sales and on viewership that Caitlin had.
Regardless of the circumstances that led to her arrival, experts say Indianapolis is taking full advantage of its opportunity, both with the Fever and its renewed embrace of women's sports. Liz Wanless is director of the Sports Innovation Institute at Indiana University, Indianapolis. She and her colleagues have been closely following Clark's impact on the city, state, and league. She's among several who told IBJ that the Fever are being supported in large part by Clark's popularity. And at least for now, that's not a bad thing.
So everything that we talk about when we talk about Caitlin Clark really falls back on this principle. And it's the idea that women's sport is not just a worthy cause, something with a philanthropic end, but it's a high-value entertainment property. And that shift, in large part, was really encouraged and generated by Caitlin Clark. When Caitlin Clark was playing at Iowa, 2021, 2022, 2023, it wasn't just about her play, she was creating a moment. So part of the Caitlin Clark effect is that this is not something interesting to watch. People felt like they were watching history unfold and that they were being a part of a moment.
Wanless says while Clark's impact goes far beyond numbers, those are as good a place as any to start. After all, few, if any other athletes have an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to the economic impact they've made on their sport. The Fever even have a dedicated section of their online team store for Caitlin Clark merchandise. The standard fare, like jerseys and shirts, certainly account for the highest sales, but there's also other items, like decals, keychains and lanyards, a mini basketball hoop, even a plush doll bearing Clark's jersey and likeness. Wanless points to a study conducted by one of her colleagues at IU Columbus, Ryan Brewer, that determined that Clark alone was responsible for nearly 27% of all attendance at all WNBA games during the 2024 season. Recently, Brewer himself told NBC News that his analysis for the 2025 season indicates something even more astronomical, a possible billion-dollar bump for the WNBA. That's billion with a B. Wanless, the sports professor, said having Clark in the equation is vital to building interest in the league long term.
The Caitlin Clark effect is a moment. And I believe the Caitlin Clark effect created economic impact as a result. Because if Caitlin Clark was achieving what she achieved in isolation, or it wasn't visible, or the people didn't pick up on it in the way that they did, that would still be a moment. But it just wouldn't create that economic impact that we saw not only for Indianapolis, but for the WNBA.
But in the near term, Clark's impact on the league is likely to be put to a major test in the coming weeks. The guard was sidelined into the second week of June with a left quadriceps strain. Since her injury was announced May 26th, ticket prices for multiple Fever games, at home and on the road, have plummeted. The Fever's home game on May 30th against the Connecticut Sun saw ticket prices fall to as low as $11 within the first 24 hours of the news. The timing couldn't be worse for teams like the Washington Mystics and the Chicago Sky, both of which moved their games to larger venues to accommodate the anticipated crowds. Both games now fall within the 2-week minimum window for Clark's absence. Teams hosting their games at larger venues is not a new trend. During the 2024 season, several teams moved their games to larger venues to meet ticket demand created by Clark. For Lobo, the impact the Fever has had on the league since Clark's arrival has no modern point of comparison within the WNBA. The team has broken viewership records left and right since May of 2024. Last September, the Washington Mystics hosted the Indiana Fever at Capital One Arena in what ended up being the highest attended regular season game in the league's history, with 20,711 spectators on hand. The crowd was third only to WNBA final games in 2003 and 2007, both of which were hosted in Detroit and had crowds over 22,000. The June 7th game against the Chicago Sky was on pace to break last year's regular season record. The game, which was essentially sold out, is scheduled to be played at the Bulls' 21,000-seat United Center, marking the first time a WNBA game has been held in the venue. Typically, the Sky play at Wintrust Arena, which has a maximum capacity around 11,000. But since news of Clark's injury broke, tickets for the Chicago and Washington games have seen an explosion in availability and dramatic price drops on the secondary market. Injury aside, the ticket demand for this season and last isn't a surprise. And while the Fever has been a big draw on the road, they've equally been popular in the team's home market, with more than 340,000 fans attending games at Gainbridge Fieldhouse throughout the 2024 season alone. The Fever led the league in home attendance by a lot. In 2024, they drew 17,036 fans per game, followed in a distant second by the New York Liberty, which had about 12,729 fans per game in the WNBA's largest market. The attendance for the Fever was higher than what 5 NBA teams drew in each of the last 2 seasons, including the Pacers. In some cases, the disparities in attendance can be attributed in part to the size of the arenas the teams play in. The New Orleans Pelicans and Atlanta Hawks, for instance, both play at arenas with fewer than 17,000 seats, while Gainbridge Fieldhouse boasts around 18,000. And while some will point to the fact that the NBA has nearly double the number of home games compared to the WNBA, which decreases demand, but Wanless says she looks at the situation a little bit differently.
When people decide they want to be a part of this moment, they come to the games. So the Fever set amazing attendance records. So they had over 300,000 individuals attend games in 2024, and this actually beat the average attendance for their NBA counterpart, the Pacers. And so when this type of enthusiasm starts to build, there are lots of other things that happen too. Sponsors take notice. There's economic impact throughout the city because when people attend games, they're not just attending the game. They're buying merchandise. They're going to restaurants. They're spending the night in hotels. In 1 year, the Caitlin Clark effect, this moment that she was creating, drove about $36.5 million to the city. And that's incredible to think about.
Let's welcome this Hawkeye to Indianapolis. It is my honor to welcome for the very first time the 2024 WNBA Draft's #1 overall pick here to Indianapolis. Please welcome Caitlin Clark.
For all the attention Clark has received, whether on or off the court, the then 22-year-old made it clear early on her staunch desire to not be a distraction for the franchise or her teammates. Instead, she wanted to focus on what happens on the court and pursue championships.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I think at times, it doesn't feel real is the biggest thing. I feel like I'm kind of stuck in a dream at times, but I don't know. I think the biggest thing I try to remember is how grateful I am to have this opportunity. And, there's so many people that would kill to be in my shoes when things seem like they're long and they're tired and I have to do this and I have to do that. I just try to remind myself of how grateful I am and I get these opportunities. I'm lucky to have these moments and, it can all be taken away from you in a second.
Since its founding in 1997, the WNBA has sought to make women's basketball a profitable enterprise, but has encountered some stumbles, big and small, along the way. Lobos said the interest in the WNBA has never been higher, and while there is a confluence of factors at play, the biggest among them is Caitlin Clark.
Everything about the phenomenon around Caitlin and the interest in her has to be a surprise to everyone because we've never seen it before on the women's side. So when you have never seen anything, you can't say, wow, this kid is going to give us the highest ratings we've ever had. This kid is going to, by the time she's a senior at Iowa, not only sell out all of her home games, going to sell out all of her road games and become this incredible phenomenon where people are going to be flying from around the country, in some cases around the world, to watch her play. No one could have predicted that because we've never seen it happen.
Clark's arrival in Indianapolis was among the summer's biggest storylines, complete with Gatorade advertisements on the side of two major downtown buildings, the Hyatt Regency inside PNC Center and the JW Marriott, one of the tallest buildings in the city.
I'm Chris Gall, Executive Vice President with Visit Indy.
For years, Visit Indy has been at the fore of promoting the city to tourists, families, and business travelers. For the first time in 2024, the Fever were a major driver of interest in the city.
Visit Indy's job is to go out and market Indianapolis as a place to visit. And when she was drafted, Caitlin Clark, we put out social media and search engine marketing, paid media, touting the fact that if you are a Caitlin Clark fan, you can come to Indianapolis to see the Indiana Fever play. And we had a 501% increase to page views on our website, visitindy.com, for fever-related activity. And we see that as a direct correlation between marketing the fact that the Indiana Fever have back-to-back #1 picks and Caitlin Clark is playing in Indianapolis. And we bought those ads in Iowa. Facebook ads, Instagram ads, search engine marketing term saying Fever basketball, Caitlin Clark basketball. People in Iowa clicked, they came into our website and looked for content, including games and Fever watching parties and the ability to interact with Indianapolis.
Gall said, while Visit Indy has always sought to put Fever basketball front and center, the 2024 season was an outlier in terms of how much the city's marketing arm spent. And while Visit Indy didn't provide specifics on their advertising costs, Gall said the major spends were through marketing on social media, radio and television, and other digital platforms.
We increased the spend 5 to 7% for the first couple of weeks because the clicks were coming in so quickly. We invested another 10 to 20% in paid media in markets throughout the Midwest, specifically Iowa, and continued to see people hungry to click for content about Indy and the Fever.
For Rebecca Lobo, who has been calling collegiate and professional women's basketball games on ESPN for 20 years, there's been a marked shift in attitude surrounding the Fever since the team drafted Aaliyah Boston, and subsequently doubled its win total from the previous 2 years combined in 2023. From 2020 to 2022, the team played its home games at Butler's Hinkle Fieldhouse and Indiana Farmers Coliseum at the Indiana State Fairgrounds. The team vacated Gainbridge Fieldhouse for that period as the venue underwent a $400 million renovation. But interest in the team really saw a resurgence from fans, from sports media, from sponsors, with Clark's selection. In 2024, the team sold out every home game and was able to expand its stable of sponsors by 245%. It signed on Eli Lilly and Company as a jersey patch sponsor. and snagged a deal with Cheez-It to add the cheese cracker brand to its court for most home games.
She is the catalyst for all of this. Not only the success on the court, but obviously the tremendous amount of interest in the Indiana Fever that we've seen, whether it's in arenas or on television. And because Caitlin decides to come out and embraces being in Indiana, they not only have a really good year in 2024, but now because Caitlin is there and because of the results of that, it becomes a free agent destination like we hadn't seen before. The Indiana Fever this year maxed out their number of games on national television. Again, there was close to a decade of time where I don't know that they had more than the minimum games on ESPN, maybe 1 or 2 a year. Like there's a whole different vibe and energy about the WNBA in Indianapolis, about the Indiana Fever, about Caitlin Clark, about women's sports. The whole narrative, I assume, for everyone who lives there has to have completely turned on its head since 2 years ago when they're playing all of their home games in a variety of arenas that aren't Gainbridge Fieldhouse. It feels like everything has changed over the course of the last year plus.
For nearly 4 decades, Christine Brennan has covered the evolution of women's sports in the United States. She's covered 21 Olympics and several women's Final Fours. Brennan spent the entirety of the 2024 season enveloped in the Fever and the WNBA, learning more about Clark for a book dropping July 8th called On Her Game. Brennan says she sees many parallels between Clark and other athletes, but with one key difference. None of them have been ambassadors for their sport and interested in growing it the same way Clark seems to be. There's also never been a moment in women's basketball, she says, where it was broadly considered appointment television by the masses.
And there are very few athletes who've done that in the course of their careers. Certainly Michael Jordan did that. Tiger Woods did that. I think you could make the case Serena Williams has done that in tennis to a certain degree. But in women's team sports, never happened before. Never crossed over into the culture and got those grandmothers and grandfathers who would have never turned on a game to turn on a women's basketball game. And not only to do that, but to know the time of the game and to know what station it was on and to make sure that their TV, their cable system, whatever, or their streaming service, that they got that station. They were able to access that game. That is, in many ways, the reason that Caitlin Clark is, frankly, so magical.
While Clark continues to be the center of attention for many fans going to games, her jerseys aren't the only ones being kept at bulk in the team store at the Fieldhouse. They are, however, a big reason that dozens of fans stood in line outside that store before it opened, ahead of the team's 2025 regular season opener against the Chicago Sky.
My name is Ken Unger. I'm the president of Charge. I've been involved in sports marketing for almost 30 years.
Unger, a former chief of staff for Indianapolis Motor Speedway, who has worked on marketing across numerous sports, said the interest in Clark is unlike anything he has ever seen.
The premise starts with the fact that she's a generational talent. She is a superstar on the basketball court. She has the skills to lead a team. Her performance in basketball is stellar. But I think more than that, her humility, her personality, her accessibility, all those different things lent themselves to what I call an aspirational talent, meaning that people, whether they are men or women, they aspired to be her in terms of both her talent and her personality.
That's not to say excitement around Clark and the Fever isn't without its complications. Liz Wanless, the IU Indianapolis professor, said she thinks there's a broader conversation to be had about the role of race in the WNBA, particularly because players of color comprise nearly 3/4 of the league. She said while the racial composition doesn't change how Clark has drawn millions of new viewers to the league since her arrival, there are challenges created by her stardom.
We are faced with asking ourselves the question, do we perceive players of different races equally in that visibility and media limelight? So there are controllables and the uncontrollables that are going to contribute to how other players can take advantage of this visibility increase to then drive sponsorship dollars their direction, to better engage with the fan base of the WNBA and of Caitlin Clark. We have to also ask ourselves, how well we are acknowledging the perception of women and the perception of race among women in not just sport, but in our work lives and our personal lives. And think about that there might be a spotlight from sport, but there might be some reconsiderations to make in terms of how we perceive these individuals in our everyday. That maybe sport is putting a spotlight on this. But yes, our most popular player right now in the WNBA, Caitlin Clark, has amazing talent, has set records, has created history, and she is also white.
Last summer, following Clark's record-breaking season, Pacers Sports Entertainment made massive changes to the Fever organization, as officials said it will help chart a path forward for the team. Those changes include a new front office, with longtime executive Kelly Krauskopf back at the helm after 6 years with the Indiana Pacers. Amber Cox was also brought on board to help lead the team's business strategy. The team brought back Stephanie White, an Indiana native who played at Purdue and spent most of her career in Indianapolis. She was also an assistant coach when the Fever won the 2012 WNBA championship and the head coach during the 2015 run to the finals. Additionally, the team's roster saw major turnover, with only 5 returning players from 2024, including Clark, Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell. The Fever brought in stalwarts like Natasha Howard, DeWanna Bonner, now third on the WNBA's all-time scoring list, and Sydney Colson. They also added Sophie Cunningham, who along with her play has become a major social media influencer. The team also announced plans for a $78 million practice facility just a stone's throw from Gainbridge Fieldhouse, on property that was previously part of the Marion County Jail facility. Former player and current analyst Rebecca Lobo said she's not surprised by the work the Fever have put in to righting the ship, or the way they've become part of the cultural zeitgeist since drafting Clark.
The thought when I saw the people that were added to the front office for the Indiana Fever is, okay, they're not messing around. This is a franchise that understands the value of this women's team, understands the value of this player, understands that they can really capitalize on all of the attention and excitement that is being driven right now by the Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark.
The Fever are taking advantage of Clark's popularity to build up the franchise in a variety of ways. But they're also looking for ways to go beyond the phenom to give other players and fans more opportunities and to create a lasting impact on the city.
Solidifying that brand for the long term is making sure, hey, there's a lot to see here. And we aren't just Caitlin Clark fans, we're Fever fans. But there's also financial reasons to this too. And the more players that can become visible and showcase their brands, the better they connect with individuals. The more the players that are able to do this, and there are players across the WNBA who have been successful at this, but the more that they connect with the fans, the greater engagement that's created, the greater investment in the Fever on behalf of these fans, and the better the Fever are positioned to retrieve those highly touted sponsorships. So there's elements, both performance-oriented, longevity-oriented, but then also financially oriented reasons to say, hey, the Fever are a great team.
In the next episode of Beyond Clarkonomics, we'll take a step back to look at the way the Fever as a franchise has transformed and the way it has begun to reestablish itself as a force in the WNBA, with planned investments and a series of major changes to its front office, coaching staff, and roster during the most recent offseason. In Indianapolis, well, it's using the Fever as a major part of its push to become an epicenter for women's sports by 2050. Clarkonomics is a production of IBJ Media. This episode was reported and written by Mickey Shuey and edited by Holly Hayes. The audio engineer and producer is Chris Spangle. Leslie Weinbender is executive editor of the Indianapolis Business Journal. Nate Beltman, owner and publisher. A special thanks to Fox 59 and CBS 4 for audio, with additional production assistance from Michelle Kaufman, Daniel Bradley, and Michael Kirsch. Artwork by Ashley Day. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.